Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode. Today, I am super excited to have with me Misty Gillis. But family, let me tell you about Misty real quick, okay? She is a part of the Birth Parent Finder, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I am so intrigued with what she does with the DNA. So, hi, Misty.
Hi, Tarsha. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So, go ahead and let the people know who you are.
So I'm a forensic genetic genealogist. I do genealogy work for birthparentfinder.com. And what I do is help reunite families that have closed adoptions or non-paternity events. For example, if you're raised by somebody that was different than the father that you've always known. I help use DNA to establish those biological families and help establish those relationships and reunite those families together.
Okay. So, first, I want you to explain to the people, say your title again. You are a
genetic genealogist.
Okay. Explain to the family exactly what that is.
So basically what happens is if you were adopted or you have a different birth parent than you're aware of, you will get DNA results that are unknown to you. And I will interpret those results by finding those relationships between the matches to be able to build family trees and establish who your biological family is.
Okay, so let me back up. How did you get into this? Like, how'd that
So I
start?
got into this because my grandfather did not know who his father was. And so we had talked about it in the family, and I had found out that you can take DNA testing through like Ancestry or Family Tree DNA, and you can figure these mysteries out by building out these family trees. Right. And I was intrigued by it, and I always wanted to know who was my great-grandfather.
Okay.
So I asked my father to take a DNA test because he was the closest related to the unknown source. And I used his DNA matches to build out family trees, and I researched online and I read about the process and how to do it, and I spoke to others who had been doing it in the field, and I got a lot of great advice and a lot of great information on how the process works with DNA results. And I was able to identify who my great-grandfather was. And after I did that, I was absolutely hooked.
Hooked, right. I can definitely attest to that. So I did take a DNA test, which you are well aware.
Yes.
And but I'll back up with my personal story. I have found at this point both sides of my family, the maternal side and the paternal side. When I found my maternal side, I did not take a DNA test. I did that by being able to obtain my original birth certificate. And I was a little more comfortable with doing it, not taking the DNA test. Number one, truth be told, I had never really put a lot of thought into taking the DNA test at that time. But number two, because I was looking for the mother. So it was, in my mind, it's like, you had a baby.
Right.
And so I was comfortable. But then I always told myself, if and when I ever try and find my paternal side, I'm going to need to take a DNA test, because I didn't want to be the person showing up saying, well, they said.
Right. Right.
I didn't go down that road. So being that this is what you do, how common has this gotten, like, is this something that people have been doing and I'm late to the party? Or
it's been happening for a long time. So I've been helping adoptees and misattributed parentage cases for probably close to 10 years now. So people have been using DNA and other investigative methods to find their biological families, especially DNA, steadfastly in the last 10 years. And it's been growing and growing and growing, and just by the amount of tests that people take.
Because I always associated the DNA testing with, like, forensic cases, like the cop cases, like what you see on TV. I never associated with my own personal journey.
So it's kind of funny you say that, because the way that the forensic cases were born is out of the advent of doing it with adoptions. So
Oh,
adoptions are really
really?
the precursor. What happened was people realized you can find these unknown parents and family members with DNA through adoption work. So why can't we apply that to cold case work?
Huh.
Yeah,
It makes total sense. Okay.
right.
And also what I have figured out, it's a workaround. There's so much red tape for us adoptees
So
that
many
have
closed gates.
closed adoptions. I always grew up knowing I had a closed adoption. And I always was told if you ever wanted to find anybody, you're going to have to get a lawyer to hopefully crack the case open for you. And even
Right.
that was not guaranteed. And of course, now I was born in the mid 70s. So by the time I'm thinking about this, we're more into the 90s. I had no thoughts of DNA testing.
Exactly.
And so I want to say we were well into the 2000s by the time I started hearing rumblings that that's a thing or a possibility, but still never applied it to my own personal situation until I
Right.
found the maternal side. And I was like, huh. Um, I want to back up just a little bit. So, to do what you do, what did you have to do to become the professional
I really just
genealogist?
had to practice and take on these cases and volunteer. And I spent a lot of my time volunteering in a lot of groups on Facebook with people. And I would say, okay, so I would read articles, I would teach myself the methodologies, I would speak to people who are pioneers in the field and just absorb as much information as I can and use those skills that I were taught to practice with different people. And I don't mean practice in a sense of a risky sense of like I didn't know what I was doing, but it was working with these people and training myself at the same time. And so I did this for 5 or 6 years, volunteering to help adoptees and people with misattributed parentage. And that's kind of where I developed my skill set.
So, kind of like outside of yourself, let's just say, for an example, building out like a husband's family tree or
Yep. And I
doing
worked
stuff.
a lot on my own family tree, and I had my grandmother tested, my father tested, my mother tested, my brother tested. And I
Okay.
worked on building out those connections. And I reached out to fourth, fifth, and sixth cousins so I could build as accurate of a tree as possible for myself. And
Wow.
that's where a lot of my practice came in, was working on my own tree. Because so my grandfather didn't know who his father was. My grandmother didn't know who her father was. Her mother didn't know who her father was. So there was a lot of mysteries in my family to solve.
Yeah. And then, it's interesting that you say that because then when you start building out the family tree, you can start seeing trends that
Exactly.
tend to happen generation after generation.
Exactly. And then especially on my mother's side of the family, there's 3 generations there who didn't know who their father was. And so working through those mysteries and learning their life stories and the struggles that those women like went through, whether it was the mother that didn't name the father on the birth certificate or the child itself, just those individual struggles. It was a humbling experience.
So, what would you say to people that tend to kind of walk around and they just like in your family's case, like just didn't know? And with the tools we have today, people that just go, "Oh, I never want to know."
If you never
And
want to know is one thing. It's interesting. I'm actually dating an adoptee, and he has no interest in knowing anything about his biological family. And so he has told me that he just has no interest in it. He's very happy with his adoptive family. He doesn't want to know. But I think it's important to know your roots, even just the backstory of your roots and your history of, the things that the women and the men in your life that have contributed to who you are went through. I think it's very humbling as a person to learn those experiences and learn that history. So even if you don't necessarily want to make contact with your family, which is absolutely your prerogative to do, learning your own family's history and where you're from, I think, is a very important and valuable part of our experience as people who walk on this earth.
I totally agree with you. I think people, when they, especially adoptees, they tend to relate finding the birth family with relationship.
Right.
And there's so many times that you have to separate the two. I talk about separating a relationship from just getting information.
Exactly.
But
Medical information is vital.
right, all of that. And there are ways that you can find, I now know that you can find out who you are and you don't have to make contact.
Exactly.
And so I think that's important for people to understand. And I think people also don't, I love what you just said about the DNA that contributes to who you are. That's a thing.
Yep.
And I think people don't realize how much of a thing that is.
Exactly.
It's a case of nurture versus nature.
Exactly.
And being that you see a lot of these cases, tell me how much nurture versus nature, like if you could give a percentage to it, what does, especially dating an adoptee?
I would say there's a 60 to 70% that it's nurture over nature. We get a lot of cases where surprisingly, the adoptee themselves work in the exact same field of work that their parents worked in. Or I guess I'll say nature, sorry. Nature is the predominant one here.
Dominant.
We see that they have a lot of the same passions, a lot of the same interests, a lot of the same history, whether it's of addiction issues, things like that, that are definitely nature that come from their biological family that are passed on to them, that they don't even know that's where they get that aspect of their life from. And so when we share those stories with them, when we say we spoke to your biological family and this is what they wanted to share with you, there's numerous times that they say, well, that's what I did when I was in college, or that's a hobby of mine, or that's what I struggled with throughout my life. And you see that light bulb kind of light up of maybe this is something I got from the natural side of my family rather than the nurture side of my family.
Wow. I didn't know that the percentage would be like that.
I would say it's very high, yes.
Wow. Okay, you just told me something, especially as an adoptee. I would tell, growing up, I remember just never out of place. I never felt out of place, but there were times where I just felt different. Like I just did different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, because I knew I was adopted, and I would say, this is probably something that comes from somebody somewhere that
Right.
I don't even know. And I remember being told that, no, because you were never around them. So that's not a thing.
No, it's definitely a thing. There's a nature component to our lives, and I think I don't want to say it's a disservice to yourself to not learn that about yourself, but it's very, I keep using the word humbling, but I think learning those things about your life and learning that about you and where it comes from is very settling. And it makes you feel at home almost knowing that you have these qualities from people that are in your
Ooh,
life.
home. That is a good way to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now that I have found both sides, I've said that here recently. I feel at home because I
Right.
can identify. I've even had the opportunity to build out my own family tree
Exactly.
and knowing the last names, seeing the traits, seeing those holes from generation to generation. And then at this point, being able to have conversations with people helps me to understand who I am. And when it comes to relationship and doing the search and reunion, I always say, because of my personal experience, just let the chips fall where they may.
Right.
You may not have a relationship, or you may start out meeting somebody and you may or may not have a relationship. You're just aware. They know you exist. I know they exist. Just let the chips fall. And
Exactly.
there's people that are afraid to do that. I want to know, how many people reach out to you? Like, how popular is it that adoptees are out here looking?
I get a couple of messages a month personally to my Facebook page where people say, hey, I've heard of you before. I've heard of the services that you offer. I've heard of the company that you work for. can you help me find my biological family? Or can you give me some insight on ways that I can find my biological family?
Mm.
And so I feel like there's a huge sect of the population that is eager to know. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are very interested in knowing. A lot of the times when I review somebody's DNA results and we reach out to a DNA match, we find out that they themselves are adopted, and that's why they took the test in the first place. And so a lot of people do that is they have started hearing that they can take the DNA test and they can find their families, but then they get stonewalled because they're not sure how to do it. And so they're hoping for that. I took a test and my parents going to pop up or my siblings going to pop up. But further than that, when it comes to second and third cousins, they're just not sure where to go next.
Right. I get that. I can speak to that. And oh, I had a question and it just left me. You were talking about second and third. Oh, so do you find that people take the DNA test, they do that, and then they just stop and they just drop the ball and then they don't want to? Okay. I want to switch gears real quick. Talk about what it means to do this journey and the emotional support that you need.
So you definitely need emotional support in this type of journey because a lot of people go into it with expectations that they're going to get nothing out of it. That they're like, I want to know, but there's not going to be any sort of reunion. I'm not sure how my family's going to react to me. There's this unknown factor of not knowing the circumstances of their birth. Was I conceived out of a sexual assault? Was I conceived out of a happy union? And so there's a lot of turmoil in the decision to take a DNA test and search for your family because there's so many unanswered questions and there's so much trauma that can be associated with whatever the answer may be. So it's really helpful to have somebody that can walk you through that process, that's done it with other adoptees, that's done it themselves looking for their own family members, that can guide you through how to hedge your expectations, but not only that, but how to deal with if there is something that does disappoint you. Because I do get a lot of situations where there's adoptees that come to us that say, I want to find my biological family, but I don't know if I want contact. So when you figure out who they are, let me know and I will think about it. And then they'll come back a couple weeks later and they'll say, okay, I want you to reach out. And we do reach out, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not good. Sometimes they're not receptive. And a lot of the times I get those adoptees that say, I have no expectation. I'm perfectly fine with whatever happens. But when they are not welcomed with open arms, they come back to me and they say, you know, this has hurt me more than I expected it to. And that's when I like to tell them, like, there's resources out there. There's therapists that you can speak to. There's adoption specialists that you can speak to. I'm always here for you to speak to. I can go against my own experiences and share what I know and try to walk you through that because it is a traumatizing experience in those situations. You're being rejected by your biological family, and that's hurtful.
Right. What does it look like for an adoptee to gain access, find out, but no contact?
It really depends on the individual person. I've had some people that are completely copacetic with it and are like, you know what, I expected as much that this was going to happen. And this was where I had put my heart into it, that I wanted no expectations or no, hope that this was going to happen. So I'm okay and I accept it. And then on the other side of the coin, you get adoptees that it's truly painful for them. And I can understand that because, you're searching and yearning for an answer for whether it's a couple of years, whether it's your entire life. But to have that person, especially a birth parent, turn their back on you and say that they don't want contact with you is a traumatizing experience.
So if an adoptee says, like you said earlier, find these people, but I don't know if I want contact. For you, are you just finding them and just saying, hey, we know, and then let us know?
Yeah, so I let them know, this is everything I know about your birth mother. This is everything I know about your birth father. Here are potential half siblings that you have. Here is what I can glean from them. If you want medical history, I do need to reach out to them. So kind of where do you want me to go from here? And I always move at the pace of the client.
Okay.
So there's no pressure on my end. There's no, just whatever they want to know, I do my best to figure that out for them.
Okay. Just for the family that's listening, that is thinking about doing this and possibly, want to use your services so they know what that looks like and what to expect. I want to say, while I'm not ready to, at this point, like totally dive into it, but I definitely recommend that if you're thinking about doing this, reach out to Misty and the team at thebirthparentfinder.com. They are incredible. And the services that they provide, like this is just what they do. Every time I have talked about you to my family and just let them know what happened, I'm like, this is just what they do. Don't ask me how they did it. This is what they do. Because I initially started digging on my own because I too am very intrigued. And
Right.
so I started digging on my own initially, hit a brick wall, and they jumped in. And in my personal experience like that, it was unraveled, the end. So
Well, thank you, Tarsha.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And when I'm ready to like tell the story, I definitely have to bring you and Jay back.
That would be great.
Because the roller coaster ride this has been.
And that's the thing, is every story is unique and every story has its own little twists and turns, and it's a journey for us to walk alongside the adoptee at the same time as the adoptee walking through it. So it's like we're holding hands walking through the story together.
For absolute sure. I want to ask one final question because you have been, I wanted to talk to you today to just let people know that you are a resource, like you're here, this is what they do. Because there's so many people that sit back and their wheels are just turning and they want to do it, but they don't know who to call, how to start,
right,
what to do, but they're just sitting on it. And I am a firm believer of don't wait till it's too late.
Right.
You don't want to wait till you reach out and everybody's gone. Because,
right.
We don't live forever. So if it's something that's in your heart to do, then I say jump.
Agreed.
Jump with caution, but jump.
I agree.
So, if you had to say anything to the adoptee community that's looking to do something like this, what would your advice be?
My advice would be to take that DNA test, to head your expectations, to be in a good place when you start this journey, be in a good place mentally. Don't have expectations that you feel like are going to hurt you. So have support, whether it's family support, whether it's friends, whether it's, anybody in your life that is supporting you and uplifting you in this experience. That's a very important aspect of your journey. And other than that, yeah, just take that test and really just enjoy the process, I guess, and make sure that you're prepared for the process.
Yes. I love what you said. Be in a good place.
Yes.
That's so important.
Very important. You need to be in a good place. You need to, if you're going to start this kind of journey, make sure that you're in a good place and you have a great support system for you.
Yeah. And I had not, while I know personally I was in a good place, but I had not verbalized. I didn't have words for it, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Being in a good place. And to know, to have this open mind.
Open mind.
Because when you go knocking, you don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And to be okay, even though sometimes if it doesn't go like you would like it to go, it can sting. But to be
yes.
But
and that's where the support system is key, because if that sting does happen, you need people to uplift you in your life.
Right. Understood. Be in a good place. So on that note, I want to thank you so much, Misty, for coming.
Thank you, Tarsha.
Also, is it okay for me to talk about what you were just on as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Check her out. She was a part of the Finding
Baby Holly.
Baby Holly.
Yep.
On 2020, she was intricate in helping solve that murder, and that was a whole roller coaster too. So, go check that out. You'll be able to see Misty there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And until next time, bye,
Yes.
family.
Take care.